its status in the post-war settlement was a source of ongoing tensions and threats of conflict and war between the Soviet Union and the Western Allies. JFK's handling of the ongoing Berlin crisis offers a case study of presidential speech writing, rhetoric, leadership, and his exercise of public diplomacy. While the newly elected president reacted to pressures, demands, provocations, and outrageous behavior on the part of Nikita Khrushchev and Ulbricht, JFK is the one who defined the discussion of each individual crisis. As John Kennedy molded public opinion in the U.S., gained public support here, so essential to his policy, by presenting each of the major incidents as a genuine crisis provoked not by the peace-loving Western allies, but by the war-mongering Eastern Bloc country. It was through speeches, television broadcasts that projected urgency that JFK was able to shape the debate, the perception of the crisis in the United States and in Germany. Through his highly skillful rhetoric, crafted by himself and a cadre of speechwriters led by Theodore Sorensen, who were very privileged to have as part of this symposium, JFK did gain control of the situation. Now, the importance of the spoken word in JFK's diplomacy was enormous, because as Theodore Sorensen explained in a 1963 lecture at Columbia University, the president is to lead public opinion as well as respect it, to shape it, to inform it, to woo it, and win it. In foreign affairs, Sorensen stated, the issues are frequently so complex, the facts so obscure, and the period for decision so short that the American people have from the beginning, and even more so in this century, delegated to the president more discretion in this vital area, and they are usually willing to support any reasonable decision he makes. JFK did that brilliantly, as he summed up in his public addresses the ongoing crisis as a struggle between the champions of freedom and the forces of oppression. The president also captured public opinion in Germany, and especially West Berlin, where his words and presence had far-reaching and enduring impact. To his credit and vision, JFK insisted during the various crises that the U.S. should, as he put it, lean forward on negotiations and not shy from direct talks with Khrushchev. But the U.S. had to enter discussions from the positions of strength and determination. Furthermore, JFK recognized the importance of personal politics, of his ability to use his intellect, his charisma, to craft the confrontations in terms that were not only readily comprehended by the public in the U.S. and Germany, but which also shaped the very fabric of the discussion. He was, however, not always fully successful, especially when dealing with the Soviets over in Berlin. Nevertheless, when planning the June 1963 trip, he and his advisors recognized that his presence in several German cities, especially Berlin, would send a strong message. The president was absolutely right. His Berlin visit electrified the city, stunned the East, and went far in bolstering the Western alliance. The restraint he showed in the cause for a free Berlin eased some of the anxieties of East German Soviet-led leaders. The reception given to him by West Berliners provided all the justification he needed. The impact of the visit reverberated for years to come, and it continues to be viewed as one of the few bright spots in the Cold War. Thank you for listening to that discussion.
Now, before Dr. Wade will present fascinating new material that he found in East German, or what used to be East German archives, that we have, and so before we start the short second part of his presentation, we have a little bit of time for a few questions, comments about this very intense, fascinating period of modern history. Please.
Yesterday was the 45th anniversary of the signing of the Limited Test Ban Treaty. Simultaneous to these tensions going on, at the same time, Khrushchev and Kennedy are negotiating, and they succeed.
Right.
The next day in Grand Forks, Kennedy gets his degree, he doesn't say anything about the fact that 24 hours early. I'm sure it was just too early to talk about.
Right.
But, you know, there is that way of looking at it that there was a kind of a shell game going on. And then behind the scenes, the Russians were willing to do something about the arms race.
Right. And apparently at one point, Khrushchev said, called in his military leaders and said, how many nuclear weapons do we have? And they said, well, Mr. Premier, we don't have enough. Like that, but it didn't stop him from posturing. When prominent visitors would come through, Herbert Humphrey went and spoke to him, and he told Herbert Humphrey in a long discussion, he said, point out your hometown so I'll make sure one of the missiles doesn't go there. And Humphrey responded, Mr. Premier, I wish we could offer you the same. But we can't. Like that. But there was this going on, and as I worked on this, one of the things that was so striking to me is that Berlin was just one of many, many issues that he had to deal with. And we didn't know how far the Soviets would go on this. We didn't know what kind of provocations would come from the West. The thing that was perhaps more terrifying than anything was that there'd be an uprising in the East, that the West would join it in East Berlin, the West Berliners would get involved, and then the Soviets would have to send in the troops, and we'd have to send in troops as well, and there'd be war. It was a very tense situation at the same time when they're conducting far-reaching and very, very important negotiations. Yeah.
You pointed out the American University speech, which has been referred to as his détente speech, where he extends the olive branch to the Soviets, and then 2 weeks later he's very bellicose in West Berlin. He says, we don't have to put up a wall to keep our people in, and he makes several hot points like that against the communists.
That's what I think what made Khrushchev so uneasy. So we can't do it. Because I'll point out in a moment that in spite of that, the East was hopeful. They were hopeful about JFK. They were hopeful that he really wanted peace. And their concern was that he would be sucked in by what they call the West German revanches, or the military powers in the States. You know, the East Germans had real hope that his American University speech really portrayed his true intentions. Yeah.
How much of the peaceful resolution of the Berlin affair by '63 had to do with the fact that the Cuban Missile Crisis had taken place, and both the Soviet Union and the United States had clearly indicated they were not going to nuclear war with each other?
I think that's an important point, that Khrushchev realized that it wasn't worth going to war over Berlin. But he had to deal with Ulbricht, who was acting on his own, and repeatedly constantly pushing the envelope and pressuring Khrushchev to act. And Khrushchev had to be careful. He didn't want to be seen as backing down too quickly to the West. He wanted to hold up a strong front, because at that time he was concerned about China, about showing the Chinese that he was
not all that different from Kennedy's own position.
I'm sorry?
Not all that different from Kennedy's own position.
Yeah, maybe that's why they understood each other. Although I think that Khrushchev had a much more earthy way of talking than JFK did. Yeah. Okay, let me say some things about his visit, specifically the stop in Berlin and the view from East Germany, which is what I originally proposed to give here. And what excited me most, because I was able to get into the archives and sniff around and find some materials that had not been looked at before. And I call this Ich bin ein Berliner, which he spelled it out phonetically. That's not the way Berliners would have a much harsher sound to it. On JFK's June 26, 1963 visit to Berlin, the view from East Germany, another case study of the Cold War. Now, late in the afternoon of June the 26th, 1963, on board Air Force One, as it departed Berlin, President John F. Kennedy sat back, relaxed, and reflected on the events of the day just completed in Berlin. President Kennedy had good reason to be pleased. The trip had accomplished many of his goals, and more importantly, he had received a reception from the Berliners that far exceeded his wild expectations. We'll never have another day like this as long as we live, he told Theodore Sorensen.